In East Africa, there are multiple tribes, but one that we should zoom into is the Harmer. And the reason we should zoom into this is because of their similarities between them, the so called Nubians, and the so called ancient Egyptians. If you look at their hairstyles, if you look at their art styles, they seem to be similar, including physical features and stuff like that. On top of that, when it comes to just general appreciation for things, it seems like this tribe, like others in the region, held on to ideologies that would then be developed in Egypt over and over again, like animism. The people who were in Egypt before the Great Pyramids and stuff like that worshipped animism. They worshipped animals. And this is easy to know because the people who still practice raw religion within that region still practice animism to the core. Now, this is all a surprise if it was far away from this place, but obviously these are all located geographically in the same region. But what if I told you that this is consistent without just this region? For example, if you look at the hair that they don, this hairstyle that is considered unique to these people in East Africa is actually found everywhere in Africa. The necklace that they wear, the neck ring that they wear it because of marriage. This is exactly the same as Bantu tribes in Africa. And of course, we can't ignore the excessive use of colorful beads, which have patterns which are similar, almost the same in other parts of Africa. And of course, ancient Egyptians were obsessed with beads. This is not unique to Africa, but the way that they were obsessed with beads is unique, especially using it as a form of communication in a way. It's not as detailed as the Zulu or the Ndebele people did had at one time, but they do have communications that suppose rank and things like that. If we go to the neck rings of Bantu tribes and possibly even other African tribes, but especially these Ethiopian tribes and Bantu tribes, this is another uncanny, like, okay, look at this. This is just one for one. The hair is the one that I want to zoom into because some people show these mercy and go, look at this unique hair. How different is it than all of the Africans out there? And I want to show you that not only is it not different, it's typical in Africa, especially around the Bantu people. These people were polygamists, but they tended to have one wife because you have to give a dowry of 30 cows in order to have a second wife. But this is the same again for Bantu tribes. Their polygamy was allowed, and even in Egypt, polygamy was allowed. But the way you would get a wife would basically make it impossible for people below a certain socioeconomic bracket to get more than one. The ancient Egyptians, like other Africans, were animists. And I don't mean that they just had gods that looked like their animals. I mean, they venerated specific animals themselves religiously, and not in a slight way, in a serious way. And this is true for other groups as well in Africa: Bantu people, West Africans, North Africans, East Africans. They all venerated animals and elevated them to gods on earth, sometimes even assuming that those gods or those animals could completely alter your life based on how you treated them. And in most cases, animism was not just the short and end of it. They also worshipped naturalistic events like the sun or sunrise or sunset or the moon or the ground. or time or the sky or the stars, all of these became a factor because they were elevated. The idea of the ancient Egyptians having gods in the same way that like Christians have a god, that is a Eurocentric point of view of looking at the world. If you look at it for itself and you read poems from ancient Egypt, you will see that they specifically would talk directly to crocodiles or directly to certain animals and be like, yo, if we feed these crocodiles, the harvest will go well. If we do this, this will go well. If we do this for the sun, this will go well. If we put meat under trees, this will go well. It's a proper African religious time. And of course, we cannot ignore the fact that 10,000 BC Africans practiced circumcision, and that circumcision left parts of West Africa and Central Africa and went towards East Africa and Egypt. This is a known fact, by the way. And through Egypt, it went into the Middle East. This is known because the Greeks actually wrote it down and said that the people of the Middle East themselves said to him that they got it from the Egyptians. And of course, we can't contradict the Greeks. We weren't there. And everyone who does only does it because they don't want to believe that Africans are the source of a lot of Middle Eastern countries. But again, you look at the hair, you look at the culture, you look at the art, you look at the religion, the food, you look at just about anything, you will notice that they are similar. And speaking of food, the food of choice for Africans before the type of corn that people eat today came was sorghum. And sorghum was available in East Africa, Egypt, Southern Africa, West Africa. It's just one of those that were multiply populated in Africa. Cows all over. Cows are just everywhere. Goats are everywhere. And remember, cows aren't just there. They're seen as like the highest status. They're seen as a form of trade. They're used for sacrifice when a king dies all over Africa. They're just something that's highly seen as like a ritual point. And more than that, cows are seen as like the height of masculinity because of their ability to kill at will, but also they're pretty gentle when left tame. Of course, cattle can also be used to get a bride, which was true in ancient Egypt until they started using monetary and I remember this one time we were presented with this where the ancient Egyptians would bring all their assets, everything they hold, and present it to a woman, and the woman would say whether or not she accepts what the guy has to provide. So Egypt was sophisticated and had more than just cattle, but at one time they used cattle just like every other tribe in Africa. So I ask you one more time, how many similarities are too much for you? At what point do you say, hell no, that's way too similar, and 100 similarities in different fields does not a coincidence make? Or will you continue to deny the ancient Egyptians and say that they have nothing to do with other parts of Africa, including East Africa? And those who accept East Africa, just do yourself a favor and accept the rest of Africa because East Africa is a spitting image of the rest of Africa in terms of how they deal with things and how they build their houses and stuff like that. So just give up this narrative that East Africans were this unique group of people that had nothing to do with the rest of Africa. It's a fool's errand. It's a waste of time.